There we go. Oh, why does that not work? There's always something that doesn't work quite right. Let me restart that app that controls my Stream Deck just so that I can use it to do my fancy buttons. Stream Deck. There we go. The glories of being a single, lonely. I say single, single's the wrong word, obviously, but being a streamer online. So we'll start with a little PowerPoint here. Hi, folks. I am Brent Ozar, Microsoft Certified Master and Consultant out of Las Vegas, Nevada. There I am right there. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. I got my start back in the late 1990s. Started as a developer, then worked my way up into architect, and then like a systems administrator, type database administrator. Gradually worked my way up in the field working with SQL Server and absolutely love it. Can't get enough of it. It's funny, you see me on these webcasts and I get all excited to show you things. And I really am like this in real life. Like I genuinely get excited about database stuff. But my day job, quote unquote, is a consultant. So what I do is I parachute in and I have 48 hours to explain exactly what's going on with a SQL server and explain exactly what people need to do in order to get pain relief. And when I say 48 hours, that kind of eclipses really quickly because on day one in the morning, we get together and we rapidly assess just one SQL Server instance. We look at the databases, the indexes on it, the queries running against it. I'm talking to the team as we go, like, hey, let me show you this query. Let me see if you can tell me what's wrong with it. Let me see if what you would change about these indexes. Because sometimes the team knows what's going on. Sometimes the team just hasn't seen the problem before, but as soon as they see it, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to fix this now. Sometimes they don't know the problem and they don't know the solutions. So in that day one morning, I'm trying to rapidly assess everybody as quickly as possible. Then we break out of the call, and I basically have about half a day to go write the findings. I need to go tell them exactly what the problem is and what order they need to go fix it in. And then on day two afternoon, we walk through those written findings together. It's a PowerPoint deck. I spend most of my life in either Management Studio or PowerPoint. Just walk through that findings deck and explain to you folks what it is that they need to do. I could not do my job without the first responder kit. There's just absolutely no way. And I always feel sorry for consultants who try to do it without the first responder kit. I hear horror stories of how long it takes some people to solve some of these problems. Every now and then I see blog posts or LinkedIn posts from consultants who are all proud that I figured out that the SQL Server was broken because of X. And they're all like, here's all the work that I did to figure it out. And I'm like, you dummy, you absolute moron. You could have seen that in 30 seconds with SP Blitz. Just run the first responder kit scripts. I don't care if you're my competitor. I don't care if you're working against me in another industry. Knock yourself out. This stuff's all open source. And I will teach you how to use it for free. Here we are. I don't care whether you're a developer or database administrator, consultant. All of us should stop having to hassle with the stupid things that are broken inside of SQL Server and Azure SQL DB. I want to expose those things to you as quickly as I possibly can so that when we work together, we can solve really hard problems, things that aren't easy to solve via the scripts. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. Over in the YouTube chat, tell me what your job description is, like what your vague job title is, and what part of the world you're from. I use this illustration to break down the various parts of what database people do. And this is the life cycle of a database application, going from designing the tables all the way to designing and testing disaster recovery. Developers, whether it's C# developers, Python developers, whatever, generally start in here. Then at the other extreme, you have database administrators and database reliability engineers who start over here in the hosting side. Let's take a look at what y'all are saying over there in YouTube. The button's not working. What is up with that? Let's switch over here. Slack. There it goes. So now I can take a look at your things going by there. William Meitzen, good to see you, Central Texas. We got DBA from Finland, production DBA from Michigan, production DBA from Belgium, development, all over the map and all over the job description map. The first responder kit is really designed to make it as easy as possible. We first started building it for database administrators because that's what I was at the time. But these days, it's really useful for consultants, database administrators, developers, you name it. If you work with Microsoft SQL Server, I want to make your job easier so that you can quickly discover these things that are broken and not have to really struggle with it. Hans Moser is the man. Production DBA from Lithuania, United Kingdom, all that. And like we said yesterday, this is one of you I saw earlier in the chat was like, hey, this is the free audience. We're the broke people. And that really what the first responder kit is all about. With it being open source, I am a really big believer that you should be able to take this for the rest of your life and move from job to job solving problems. Whereas if you write your own utility scripts, your employer may not let you take those to another job. Your employment agreement might have restrictions in it that say you're not allowed to take your scripts from one company to the other, or anything that you develop is property of the company that you work for. I was actually an expert witness in a case where a database administrator took their scripts, things like checking how much file space there was or checking what queries were blocking each other. Took just utility scripts like that from one company to another, and his old company sued him for a ton of money. Dude had to get a lawyer, defend himself in court. So be careful when you take your stuff from one job to another. There are actually real dangers with that, and they will sue you if they get the chance, if you've burned some bridges along the way. Let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. I'm going to push this button and nothing happens. Damn it. See, I'm pushing the button and nothing's happening here. I don't know what's going on with that. I'll have to troubleshoot that. It's always something, isn't it? It's always something in technology. It never freaking ends. So what we're going to talk through today is we're going to start by doing a server-wide health check with SP Blitz. I have a live running SQL server that's doing a workload. What you can do is you can follow along on your own SQL server. So if you want to do the same kinds of things that I'm doing. Now, of course, everything in SQL Server's diagnostic data is only stored in memory. So if you're going to check things like the health of the SQL server, you're going to want to do that on the production server. If you do it on the development server, you're going to not really see anything interesting because it doesn't have the same workloads. Kind of laugh at Rohit says we have AI, Brent, no more troubleshooting issues. I ask ChatGPT and things like that all the time. In the voice of Brent Ozar, tell me the solution to this problem, and I laugh at how often it gets it wrong, so I have job security for a little while there. So we're going to start with a health check, then we're going to move on to performance checks and try to figure out what's happening inside our SQL server. In this short class, we're only going to spend 3 hours together here. There are only so many scripts that I'm going to be able to cover it. Sean says, when you're covering something that is different or not supported in Azure SQL, please call it out. Unfortunately, Azure SQL has no documented change list. They don't tell you what changed or when. There are no release notes. So things work all the time in Azure SQL and then don't work and then mysteriously do work again. I ain't got time for that BS. I'm going to get up on a soapbox for a second. If Microsoft can't be bothered to write a change log for what the hell they're doing in their app, I have zero interest in dealing with that app. That is their problem. Nathaniel says, I'm imagining a world where Microsoft actually published change notifications for Azure, right? Wouldn't it make sense that if you're going to host a production application that you need to rely on, you actually might know when things are going to be changed or might know when things are going to get broken? But no, they don't. That to me is just amateur hour. That's ridiculous. That's not production quality. Yes, I have a lot of anger about that. My demos will be in my lab. I'm using SQL Server 2025 on a 4-core 32 gig of RAM VM. I'm using the largest available Stack Overflow database to really put my SQL Server under pressure. And I'm running a workload from my mastering classes used by an app called SQL Query Stress. You repeating that workload and running it on your own servers is not the goal of today's class. All I need to do is put my server under a workload. So if you want to learn more about that technique of running load tests against your own machines, you can learn about that over at brentozar.com/go/workload. In the span of today's class, you are going to learn all kinds of things about your own SQL server. When you run things like SP Blitz Cache, you're going to say, oh my God, I had no idea that this setting was even a thing. One thing I want to make sure that you understand is in every one of these scripts, they all have a URL column. And I jokingly say that URL stands for you read, loser. But what it means is that we've poured, and I say we, a lot of us who are volunteering to build this first responder kit, have poured a lot of our love, work, and time into building resource URLs for everything that we alert you about. So that way, when you see a warning, if you don't understand it, go copy paste the URL into your browser. I don't expect you to know every warning. I don't know every warning. Like sometimes I'll read a warning that comes out of SP Blitz and I'm like, all right, what exactly does that mean again? And I got to go read the URL. Sometimes it's even funnier when I find out that I'm the one who wrote the URL. I'm not going to teach you how to solve every problem or what every warning means here today. I just want to focus on teaching you how I investigate problems and where to go next to dig deeper. You're going to have all kinds of questions as we go through this. This class is not about fixing the problems. That's where my fundamentals and mastering classes come in. Today's goal is just about finding the problems, figuring out where these things are in our SQL server. So the first script that we're going to start with, and we're just about out of PowerPoint here. I'm going to do little introductions for each of these scripts as I go into them, and then we're going to hop over into the SQL Server itself. The first one is SP Blitz. Now, I wrote SP Blitz. This is the first script in the first responder kit that I wrote. I wrote it a really long time ago. Man, I'm going to say it was probably 15 years now. Because as a database administrator, I had this problem. People would keep bringing me servers. People would be like, hey, we found this SQL server in the accounting department. It was over behind Bob's desk. Bob retired, and now it's your problem. We got to make sure that this thing never goes down. Bye. And I'm like, well, how did Bob configure it? Why is this SQL Server 2008? How did he configure this? What is it used for? What's going on inside? What link servers does it have? Are there backups configured as CheckDB? So I wrote this script in order to do an overall health check against your SQL Server. The times when you run it is when you're taking over a brand new to use SQL Server, whether you're starting a new job or whether you're looking at a SQL Server's health for the first time. Whenever you think that a server is ready for production, when you build a new SQL server, I can't tell you how many times that I've worked with clients who were getting ready to go live, and I ran SP Blitz, and I was like, no, you are not ready to go live. You're missing all kinds of stuff here. When you come back from vacation, so true story, I had a friend of mine who was a production DBA, went off for a couple of weeks vacation. It was their first time that they'd ever taken vacation in their production DBA life. They came back and they ran SP Blitz, and there were all kinds of things changed on their production servers. People had added themselves as sysadmin, the backup stuff was changed, schedules on jobs were changed, all kinds of crazy stuff. This is not a script that you run every 15 minutes or even every day. This is a health check. You could theoretically log it, say, once a month in case you wanted to go back and see what changed on a SQL server. But of course, if you're being a good database administrator, you won't see things changing on your server without you knowing about it. Azure SQL DB, it is unsupported due to MS for each DB. This is an undocumented stored procedure that Microsoft kind of sort of documented, kind of sort of supported. It's used widely all over the world. Most of the other first responder kit scripts work as is in Azure SQL DB with varying levels of working. But this one absolutely will never work in Azure SQL DB. It will work in managed instances, but not in plain old Azure SQL DB. So let's go take in and see how I work with it. Let's see here. We'll switch over to my remote desktop and pop out of PowerPoint. So what I have here is I have and I should rerun this just so that you can see it. I have a SQL Server 2025 instance up and running. So I'm going to start with running plain old SP Blitz. And I'm going to add a parameter that's not the default. I'm going to say check server info equals 1. I also have a load test running in the background. I'm going to cancel that for a moment. So what does check server info equals 1 do? I am a consultant. And so when I take over a SQL server, I really have no idea what's going on it. Like, what version of the operating system is it? How many CPU cores does it have? When you turn on check server info equals 1, it just gives you a little bit more informational stuff down at the bottom. So if you've never used that before, that's okay. This tells me things like how the server itself is configured. These aren't necessarily problems, so I'm going to run it that way. And we'll come back to more about why that is. Now, SP Blitz, the way that it works is it returns a prioritized health check of why are the things, or what are the things that I think are kind of broken on the SQL Server right now, or things you really need to be aware of. Brian, that's an interesting question. How to zoom? What you can do is, it's really cool. There's this thing called a search engine, and the most popular one out there is Google. So if you go to Google and you type how to zoom in on Windows, then you get answers in there. Isn't that cool? You can put in things like, how did Brian Busey get his current job? And it says, maybe you got interning. See, this isn't quite as good unless that's you right there. But otherwise, you'll want to just use that thing called a search engine. There's also one called Bing, but it's kind of sketchy. Okay, so this gives you this prioritized list of what we think is broken on the SQL Server right now. It's got categories. If it's a database-specific problem, you can go into there, or you'll see the database that's involved there, and then you'll get this URL for every one of the errors. I jokingly say that priorities 1 through 49 are reasons why people get fired. People don't get fired because the database is slow. You actually get more resources when the database is slow. They actually call you in for more help, or they get you more training, or they tell you to spend more time on it. People get fired because they can't restore backups. People get fired because the primary goes down repeatedly in an availability group and they can't figure out why. So these really urgent priorities, and I got to be a little tricky. I can't say high priority because the numbers are low. They're sorted in numerical order. Priority 1 is the most important thing. The most urgent things will show up in here first. And I need to take a second to talk about assumptions. So let's come over here to this camera. I can't tell you how many times in my life that I have been a consultant somewhere and someone has said, well, that can't be right. That script must be wrong. I have backups, or something to that effect. I don't have database corruption. So I'm going to tell you a story. So I got hired to go into a big, huge office in Chicago, big skyscraper office. And when I get hired as a consultant, if you want me to come on site with you, I send you this little PDF that says what to expect when you're expecting Brent Ozar. And it's got a list of things in there like what to order for lunch. I'm not picky. I don't care what food you get. Just don't get a whole bunch of carbs because people will fall asleep in the afternoon. how to set up your computer, how to set up the most recent first responder kit, and so forth. One of the things that I say inside there is, by default, I default to the same kinds of stuff that I wear at conferences, t-shirts and jeans, typically. If you want me to wear something different, I'd be glad to. Just tell me what to wear ahead of time. So I go into this Chicago office and I open I say, where's the meeting for Brent Ozar? They send me down a hallway. I go down the hallway. I open this door and it's a giant boardroom. It's this big fancy wooden table with floor to ceiling windows looking out over the Chicago skyline. That table must have been big enough to seat 30, 40 people at it. Big, long conference table. And everybody sitting at that conference table, everybody was wearing a full-blown suit. I was like, I got the wrong room. And I start to close the door. And they're like, no, you're Brent Ozar. Go, come in, by all means. We're waiting for you. And I was like, what did I just get myself into? So I start talking, and I'm like, hey, so, tell me what the problem is on the server. And they're explaining what the problem is. And they've got SSMS up on the screen. And I already feel like totally outclassed because everybody in there is, super dressed up. And it turns out the people in there are actually database administrators and developers and executives. And a lot of the people in the room hadn't heard of me. They were living that kind of enterprise life where they don't really read blogs or watch YouTube. So a lot of them were giving me the stink eye. And I said, all right, let's start out by running SP Blitz. Let's just take a look at the server. It runs SP Blitz. And a couple of warnings pop up right away around database corruption detected. And I'm like, oh, this is a little interesting. So you have corruption right now in your databases? And these cocky suit-wearing database administrators are like, no, that's impossible. We have checks to run CheckDB all the time. It's on a scheduled agent job. Your script must be wrong. And I said, I love playing Columbo, which was this TV detective who feigns being stupid. Like, oh, you call me, I don't know what I'm doing. Right up until the end, and you realize he knew exactly what he was doing. So I play Columbo. Oh, I'm sorry. It's right. I'm an amateur. Just run a couple of scripts. Hold on. So show me these CheckDB jobs. You're on top of it. Show me those CheckDB jobs. And they go into Agent and they right click on the CheckDB jobs and they go in and say Show History. And all of a sudden, when they go into Show History and they look at all the history of the jobs, it's nothing but red X's going down as far as they have history, meaning the job has failed. Me being Columbo, I'm like, oh no, that's okay. It's probably not you. It's probably just something real small on the job. Like there was an error in a T-SQL script near the end. It's probably checking for CheckDB, right? It's not. It wouldn't be failing all of those parts. Why don't you go in and look at the individual steps? And databases had been failing corruption checks for months. And the people are like, why aren't we getting alerts? And they go to look at the alert configuration, and it was hard-coded to a person who had left the company long ago, and no one else was getting notifications. Which tells me they didn't have error alerting set up. They didn't have their notifications set up correctly. They had database corruption all over the place, and they didn't have any kind of monitoring tools that were also telling them about failed jobs. So I said, okay. I said, so you do have database corruption. I said, unfortunately, my attorneys and insurance agents won't let me solve performance problems on a server where the databases are corrupt. I said, you look like smart people. You were super confident. I bet you've solved corruption problems before. You know how to solve those, right? People in suits, oh, yeah. We're seeing your database mission. We absolutely know that. I said, great. You're on your own. You're going to go solve that corruption problem, and you call me when it's done, and I'll look at your performance problems. And that was the end of that engagement. When you see something come out of SP Blitz, don't be cocky. Don't say, oh, I've got this under control. This is like a doctor's second opinion. You should go look. Jobs fail all the time. People's notifications fail all the time. That's what this script is for. Let's go back over here. So go in through this list and actually dig in. Go look at the extra details about what other things we returned, like whether or not you're doing CheckDB or whether or not CheckDB has failing. Go in and take this stuff seriously. Priorities 1 through 49 are the real deal. Now, the further that you go past priority 49, the less urgent this stuff is. You don't have to worry quite as much about the SQL Server going down quickly. But there are things that you probably want to know about. For example, you've got triggers on tables, or you've got stored procedures with recompile. If you go into the more info URLs, we typically have more info diagnostic queries that you can run to see more details. For example, it'll list the triggers that are present on the tables. Now, as I go further down here, there are also things about non-default server configurations, things that people have changed, security issues, weight stats, like what your server's top weight stats are, and informational stuff. And all this stuff is prioritized in the order that I would want to work through it. Right about now, some of you are running as people that's on your servers and you're like, oh, sweet potato. There are a lot of issues on here. Don't go fixing them yet. What you want to do is gather all of the SP Blitz data across all your SQL servers so that you can then go into your manager and say, all right, here are the things that concern me. Here are the things that I found out in today's free webcast that I got to work at on my SQL servers. And one way you can do that, if you want to centralize the data, if you've got it across a lot of servers, is that you can also say output database name equals, let's say that I'm going to throw it in master, output schema name equals DBO, and then output table name equals Blitz. So then that way you can write this stuff to disk. There's even an output server name if you want to push all of the data centrally. I don't know about you, but I generally don't do that. When I do this, when I execute this, then I'm going to turn around and say, select star from master DBO Blitz. And what I'm going to get is a table that has the same so Todd says, would the backup priority thing show up if we're using a third-party backup module like Cohesity? Hold on a second here. Todd, was it Todd? Todd, what did I just say about taking it seriously? Todd, it's not backing your databases up. Todd, I'm not lying. Todd, this is the real deal. You got to pay it. Buckle up. There needs to be a seatbelt on your office chair. Buckle the F up. This is the real deal. It's showtime. Your databases are not being backed up. If you have a third-party tool that is backing up the databases and it doesn't show up in here, it's taking dirty snapshots of your storage, things that are called crash-consistent snapshots that may not be recoverable. I don't know how to tell you this, Todd, but sometimes third-party vendors that tell you their software can do something, they're lying to you. Sometimes we didn't configure it quite correctly, like the vendor suggested. So Todd and everyone else in here, for the love of God, I am volunteering my time. Will you please, for the love of God, listen? If it's in SP Blitz, you are not discovering some unknown bug. This has worked this way for more than a decade. Get to it. Let's go back to work. So, let's go in and look at the output of the, Todd says, my bad, correct. And Todd, I roast you just to make sure that everybody else drives home the point, because this stuff is really important. After all, this is why people get fired. And I can't have y'all getting fired. I need every one of you to have your money and a job, because if you don't have money and a job, your boss isn't going to pay for your training, and I'm not going to be able to buy my next Rolls Royce. Yes. I am already planning my second Rolls Royce. So back here over into the important stuff that you're much more interested in. So when I write it out to tables, then I can do a select star from the tables. And you notice there's a couple of new columns in here. There's a column for server name and for check date. So what this is really useful for is if you want to centralize all of your data across multiple SQL servers, you can do that here. You can bring it all into one table, and then that way you can check the health of your entire estate, especially if you use the output server name column. You can push all that data out into one place. Deladara says, I thought you were a Ferrari guy. I am open to alternative lifestyles. I actually sold my Ferrari. I had a Ferrari 328, sold that. Right now I've got a Rolls-Royce Dawn, a Porsche 911 Targa, a Honda Beat, and a Porsche Boxster. Kind of going through different stages of my collecting. The other thing that this is really useful for is sometimes your boss will come to you and say, what have you been doing this year? And you don't want to just answer with, well, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. You want to be able to say with some kind of metrics about what you've been up to this year and whether or not things are getting better. Because your boss wants to know, like if you want to ask for a raise, your boss is like, so what makes you worthy of a raise? Well, one of the cool things about SP Blitz, about writing it to tables, is that you can then group together how many findings you had. So you can say, select, we'll say, count distinct server name as servers, sum one as warnings from Master Blitz, and then we'll also go through and we'll throw in year of check date as year, month of check date as month. We should probably say count distinct. Well, we'll just do sum one for now. For a master DBO Blitz, group by year of check date, month of check date, order by 1, 2. So then you can go through and do reports based on, at the beginning of the year, how many servers did you have and how many warnings did you have? And at the end of the year, how many servers did you have and how many warnings did you have? I love doing this approach with client production database administrators. I had one client production database administrator who saw this video and then went back to his boss and over the next year said, all right, now I've got 60% more servers than I ever had before. And the urgent warnings per server went from here down to here because I've been working on getting the environment to a safer place. Because of that overall, 60% bigger environment, and yet it's 70% safer than it was before, made it really easy for that database administrator to get a raise. Now, Eliard asks, is it better to execute SP Blitz against a master database or in a custom utility database? There are a couple things that are central to what you're asking. It's actually really a good question. If you put stuff in the master database, you can call it from any database. Like I can be in the Stack Overflow database and I can just write SP Blitz and a SQL Server automatically finds it in master. That's really useful for the performance tuning scripts because, for example, you're going to want to run SP Blitz index to analyze a database's indexes. It's easier if you just put the first responder kit in the master database. So why is it that you'll hear people say, never put stuff in master, that's a bad idea? Well, the reason why they say that is that you don't want to restore the master database onto another server. If you have some kind of disaster and you need to go fail from one place over to another, you don't want to deal with restoring master. It is a total pain in the rear. I think I've done it twice in my career, and both times I was like, I swear to God, I am never doing this again. Plus, you can introduce more problems than you solve. The thing is, though, you don't need to restore the first responder kit scripts. They're just open source scripts. You just go download the latest one and put it into the master database on whatever server you go build. So it doesn't matter that it's not backed up in any way. The other thing is sometimes you'll hear people say, Don't name your stored procedures with just SP underscore. That's a performance problem. Yeah, but that's actually what we want for SP Blitz and these kinds of things. Because see, when you name your stored procedure SP underscore, then SQL Server will look in the master database to check to see if it's available, then go look in the user databases. Well, it's not exactly true. It will look in the user databases too as well first, and it'll override sometimes if you put multiple versions out. So that's what I want, though, is I want a command that I can run from any database without having to fully prefix it. And it's not like I'm worrying about a 3-millisecond overhead of trying to find SP Blitz in which database it's in. If you're running SP Blitz so frequently, or any of the health check stored procedures so frequently that you're worried about a few milliseconds, you have bigger problems. Where you put the first responder kit, put it in master. Sometimes people will say I'm not allowed to put stuff in master. That's fine. You can put it in other databases. It's just kind of a pain in the rear, because if you put it in, say, DBA tools, then you got to fully prefix it, exec dba tools.dbo.spblitz. And then when you're trying to check a particular database, you got to pass that in there. So it's kind of a pain in the rear. That takes a whole lot longer than the 3-millisecond overhead thing we're worried about. The other part that you're kind of subtly asking is, where do I store tables if I'm going to write them out? I am fine with you using a utility database there, and I do that myself as well. Okay, so we've got that together. Now, Pasquale says if you run SP Blitz with check user database objects on a server with 50 plus databases, may cause temporary problems for the server and or user. So what Pasquale is doing, just to put it in over here. So what Pasquale is doing is reading the output of SP Blitz. Pasquale ran SP Blitz on a server with more than 50 databases, and what he's typing there is the warning that he got back from SP Blitz. So let's all give a round of applause for Pasquale for being able to read things. I'm serious, because not everyone can read. Some people can't read. Some people on this webcast can't read, sadly. So when you also read the rest of that warning, it will tell you what to do in that situation. There's a parameter that you can add called bring the pain equals 1. William Gerard asks, how do I run this query against multiple servers? I don't do anything over multiple servers, because I have the weirdo job of being a performance tuning consultant. I don't ever tackle multiple servers at once. The people that I know who do run it use PowerShell. And the DBA tools framework, let's go take a look at that. So if you go open up Google, I'm sorry, not Google, Google Chrome or whatever browser you choose to use, dbatools.io. dbatools.io is this really cool PowerShell framework, and it's got, if we go over to docs, I should have gone to commands, but Blitz. There we go. There's a commandlet for installing the first responder kit, and there's also commands to run queries against multiple replicas, especially using things like a central. What's it called? What's the name of the repository that you can configure? Management server? Central management server. That you can use to store all of your connection strings in, for example. And that's a SQL Server feature built in, not even just PowerShell. So they're really cool. Totally free. Huge support community, really big support community, very active. You can get to their Discord, to their Slack down there from that. I wonder where the Twitch goes. That's kind of interesting. And vibrantly updated. Very good stuff. All right, let me go to my notes and see what else I needed to check. Okay, there we go. So the next thing that I want to teach you about SP Blitz is, let's say that you've got a group of databases. Let me just do this. SP database objects equals 0. Let's say that why did I not check user database objects? Let's say that you've got a database, or you manage the server, but you do not manage the databases inside. The tasteful thickness says this isn't a feed stream. It could be if you pay me enough. It could be. I always laugh at that. For years, I took pictures on Instagram, and I would always, like, I'd be sitting in a hot tub somewhere, and my feet would be poking up out of the water. I did this for years, just like I was always, wherever I was in a hot tub somewhere, I would take pictures of that. And somebody said to me once, they're like, "Do you have some kind of feet thing?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I never realized that I always put my feet in the pictures, and I should have been charging for that all along." So what check user database objects does is it just simply skips the things like, are there stored procedures with recompile? Are there triggers inside the database? So that if you don't control the code in the database, you can skip over that. It's good for if you only manage the server and not the databases inside. All right, then there's one other really cool parameter. Child of the Most High God says, I love your humor. I am weird for sure. So there's one other really cool parameter. What if you want to ask a question of someone like your colleagues, or you want to post a question on SQL Server Central or Stack Overflow, and you want to give people context about the kind of server that you're dealing with? What you can say is spblitz output type equals markdown. And this returns the same stuff that and of course all these parameters are interoperable. You can use all these interoperably with each other. Output type equals markdown gives you a markdown styled text list of everything that was that we were found inside the server. And if a particular warning got pulled multiple times, we even pull it down into a bulleted list for you. So this is so useful if you use a markdown editor where you can then go copy paste this out, or you can copy paste it into sites like Stack Overflow or SQL Server Central. So this is useful so people don't have to keep asking you follow-up questions. How big are your databases? How many cores do you have? What version of SQL Server are you on? Now you're probably going to want to go through here and redact anything that is specific to your company's security. Like if you had sysadmin warnings inside here, then you'd want to redact that so that it doesn't go out on the interwebs. But if you're emailing a friend of yours, this is absolutely wonderful in that it gives you all the detail. Plus it pulls out stuff that doesn't really matter as much, like things like the warning URLs. There you go. So now this gets updated pretty frequently. If we go over to, let's see here, Brent, Ozar, First Responder Kit updates. If we go look, there is a category on the blog there where I put a post out every time we update the First Responder Kit. We update it about once a quarter. So about once a quarter we put in here. The most recent one was in July. There's getting ready to come out. Another one will be coming out next month. And for each one of these, you can go see what it is that we changed. You certainly shouldn't go back and add in or go back and read through all of the past ones. That just doesn't make sense. But starting now going forward, it'll tell you, for example, any time that we add stuff inside here, like I added a replica warning for AG replicas that are getting more than 60 seconds behind. I warn you about SQL 25's new memory health stuff. And for example, I'm going to go in here to the April update. And in here, we've got other stuff. Added a warning for non-default database scope configurations for 2022, output type markdown if the output had an ampersand in it, and so forth. All kinds of stuff. So James says, what about the parameter for telling it the normal job owner? James thinks that is the best parameter. So I'm going to give you a couple of ways to think about this. One way to think about it is to go to, and it says inside here for support, go over here to these places. But if you go to firstresponderkit.org, firstresponderkit.org, that should, assuming that my internet connection is working correctly, take you to the GitHub repo for the First Responder Kit. I can also go to GitHub First Responder Kit, Brent Ozar. And that will take me to the First Responder Kit GitHub repository. There's something on here that if you scroll down, it's called the documentation. And the documentation tells you all kinds of things about how this stuff works. Try hitting the documentation first. If there's something that isn't in the documentation, the cool thing, one of the many cool things about SP Blitz, is that it is something that we call open source. No, not open source, those things on your body that your mother has been trying to get you to fix, but open source, meaning you can just edit the contents of it. So if there's something that in here, like let's see, owner of jobs, this is to set the owner of jobs if you have a different account other than SA that you use as the default. It's written right there. I didn't set that up. But the other thing you can do is, if there's something you're interested in, you can copy that and you can hit Control F. And that's not a swear word. That's not like I'm going to tell you to F off. That Control F stands for find. And then you can go put that in there and you can go see where it's used. So it tells you jobs owned by users. It's going to warn you if the job owner is anybody other than this. There you go. So that tells you right then and there. If that is still not enough for you and you want more information about how that works, read the documentation. Because in the documentation, we tell you where to go in order to ask questions. The First Responder Kit has a Slack channel where you can go through and ask questions live interactively as well. Now, next up over in the chat, let's come back over here because there was another interesting thing in here. Gerald says a redact sensitive information parameter would be great. So I wanted to talk about the misconception of open source. One of the things with managing open source and building open source is that often users like y'all think that we don't have enough ideas, that we're starving for ideas on what else we should build. We are not starving for ideas. We're starving for code. If you want a feature, you need to be prepared to build it. And that actually happens every month. People contribute code to the First Responder Kit. It's delightful. I'm always amazed at the number of people who put in code for the First Responder Kit. But when you go to the GitHub repository and you click go add a new issue and you start to put in a feature request, it'll automatically tell you, are you ready to build code for this feature? And that answer needs to be yes. Because if it's not yes, if you're not building the code for it, we're not building the code for you. Let's see here. Moritz says, do you have the same approach if there are availability groups involved or other clusters in order to find specific bottlenecks for these setups? Yeah, you run SP Blitz on each of the replicas. You have to check all the replicas because very often people will have different setups on the different replicas. True story. I was working with a client like 3-4 weeks ago, and their primary had 32 cores. I'm just picking numbers, like 32 cores and half a terabyte of RAM, and their secondary had like 24 cores and 256 gigs of RAM. They weren't even close on the same sizes. And I'm like, why did you do that? You know, when you fail over from one replica to another, performance isn't going to be the same. They're like, oh, yeah, that's true. We didn't think about that. Different SQL Server configurations, different trace flags, etc. Availability groups doesn't make your job easier. Availability groups makes your job harder. It's not to say that I don't like availability groups. I absolutely love them. They're fantastic. So that's the first script, SP Blitz. It gives you a health check, a prioritized health check on what is sketchy about your SQL Server's health. This is the first thing that I run when I go sit down at someone's SQL Server. And right now, you should be running it against your production SQL Server to get a rough idea of what's going on. The second script that we're going to run together is called SP Blitz First. I know. I know. I know. But there's a reason for that. See, the reason that I wrote SP Blitz first and that I named it SP Blitz first is as a consultant, I am usually booked a couple of weeks in advance. But of course, I'm a performance tuning consultant. So I get a lot of calls from past clients going, or I used to before I built this. I'd get a lot of calls from past clients going, I don't know why I'm using the clicker. I got a phone right here. I could be using the phone. I would get all kinds of calls from clients going, Brent, the SQL server's slow right now. Can you check? Brent, something's broken on the SQL server right now. Can you come and take a look? No, I can never take a look. I am always booked like 2-3 weeks in advance minimum. Right now, I'm booking stuff for November. I'm always booked in advance. So I wanted to give clients a script that would look at the same kinds of things that I look at. I wanted it to be the first thing that they ran when there was a performance emergency. SP Blitz first would be the first thing that people run in the event of an emergency. And it's also the first thing that I run after SP Blitz, if that makes any kind of sense. Let's go take a look at it. So let's go pop over back here into the remote desktop. Let's close all our windows, close this, close this. I'm going to put my SQL Server back under a performance emergency. I'm going to hit go here on SQL Query Stress. I'm going to fire up Task Manager just so that you can see that it is having a performance emergency. My CPU is what they would call high. So now that we're having a performance emergency, I'm going to go over, oh my God, things are slow. What should we do? I'm going to run SP Blitz first. I'm not going to do any parameters with it at all. I'm just going to run SP Blitz first. So the way that SP Blitz first runs is it takes a snapshot of a whole bunch of stuff. It takes a snapshot of wait stats, perfmon counters, different DMVs, and it writes this stuff over to TempDB. Then it waits for 5 seconds. Then it takes another snapshot and it compares what was different between those two snapshots. It doesn't start an extended events trace. It doesn't start a profiler trace. It doesn't start any additional overhead on SQL Server. Just grabs a bunch of stuff to TempDB, waits for 5 seconds, grabs that stuff into TempDB again, and then compares the two. In theory, SP Blitz first should finish in like 6 or 7 seconds. But when your SQL Server is under extreme heavy duress, like this one is now, it's normal for the SQL Server to take longer and longer to run diagnostic queries. I am not going to show how to use this here. Dedicated admin connection. HTTPS brentozar.com/go/DAC. I'm not going to show how to run this here, but if you want to learn more about the dedicated admin connection that SQL Server has in the background that you can go run emergency diagnostic queries on, you can go learn more about that there. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to cancel my load test to temporarily relieve some of the pressure just so that this thing can finish. And so you'll look that it'll look like the results are very similar to SP Blitz. Coy says, do you take apprenticeships? This is why I offer training classes. And if I switch over here to this, it's free. Free real estate. If you go over to brentozar.com/go/fun week, it is a registration required, totally free event with fundamentals of index tuning, fundamentals of query tuning, fundamentals of column store, and fundamentals of TempDB. Unfortunately, due to the realities of my time, I can't individually apprentice people one-on-one. Instead, I want to apprentice hundreds of you or thousands of you all at once, like the 591 of you watching right now. I want to try to teach as many of you as possible. I am not one of those consultants who tries to hide my knowledge under a barrel to make sure that you don't see it. I want to share with you everything that I know. Coy said, I said I enrolled. Phew, I thought I was going to get roasted. No, I genuinely love the fact that there are so many of y'all out there around the world who want to learn, and the fact that you want to learn from me is incredibly humbling. It is an honor. I am excited to do stuff like this. I hope that for each and every one of you, I can make your job easier. I hope that you can go tackle stuff faster with more confidence. I hope that you can get done with your work earlier and go home and see your loved ones. For those of you who are living in your mom's basement, I hope that you can find a date, although the dating scenario is terrible, and I would understand if you use Tinder and Grindr for the rest of your lives, because if I was young, I would probably do exactly that. But moving on, fun week, totally free. I will teach y'all that. So SP Blitz first. So what this does is it also returns a prioritized set of warnings, very similar to, Breck says, I helped him and now retired. That's good. He's retired and you're watching YouTube for the roasting, probably. Gives you a prioritized set of lists, or prioritized set of results. This set of results is focused on why is the SQL Server slow now? Not as much like what's unhealthy, you don't have backups, you have database corruption, etc. So you have all kinds of reasons why the SQL Server might be slow right now. I'm going to collapse the URL column because we now know that that stands for you read loser. And instead, I'm just going to make more room on the screen so that I can, when I zoom in, I see more stuff. See more butts. Memory has been dangerously low recently. You have high CPU and so forth. You got all these things in here that these are the reasons why we think SQL Server is slow right now. You start at the top and work your way down. For each one of these, there's a click to see details because we tend to put multiple lines inside there about what's going on. For example, this is a brand new one that just came out in SQL Server 2025. That it's starting to track when you hit resource semaphore weights and so forth. So you get all kinds of cool warnings in here. For some of them, there's also a how to stop it command. For some of them, we will actually tell you what you can do in order to stop it. Now, with this, there are some gotchas. For example, if you have a long-running query that's blocking other people, if you have a backup that's been running a long time, if there's a blocking chain, we'll tell you which queries we would suggest killing, but we warn you that there can be problems, of course, associated with killing queries. In terms of killing queries, because this is going to be something that pops up a lot when you're running SP Blitz first, let me point out something to you. When you kill a query in SQL Server, rollbacks are single-threaded. Rolling work forward is multi-threaded, but rolling work backwards is single-threaded. What that means is, let's say you have a big query that's got like max stop 8, and it's been all 8 threads have been dragging all kinds of changes forward, doing all kinds of work, writing things, and you kill that. Let's say it's been running for an hour using 8 threads, and now the rollback is only using 1 thread. It is conceivably possible that that rollback could take 8 hours or more. On the other hand, it may happen instantly. Depending on what the query was doing, it may roll back absolutely instantly. And there has never been a tool in SQL Server to tell us how long a rollback is going to take before we kill the query. So be really sure when you kill a query that you're not going to cause more problems than you solve. Restarting the SQL Server, same exact thing. What will happen is when SQL Server goes to start back up, the first thing it does is look at the well, it's not the first thing it does, but it goes and opens the transaction log and says, what was I in the middle of doing? Oh yeah, I was rolling back a query, and then has the database offline while it goes through and does all this rollback work. When you're tempted to kill a query, what I would always prefer that you do is go look to see whose query it is. And SP Blitz Who will tell you which, or SP Blitz First will tell you which session it's coming from, for example, which user account, which application, what server name, what workstation name it's coming from. go there, go talk to that person and have them restart their app or restart their machine. Because that way, if their application has any kind of checking, sometimes apps will have a checking that says if the number of transactions is more than 0, just commit. And then that way it's happening on their side rather than happening on your side. Because otherwise, if you kill the query, everybody's going to assume that it was your fault when it wasn't necessarily your fault. Envision says, does accelerated database recovery make any differences to that? It definitely helps, but it has so many drawbacks that I'm really hesitant to recommend it. The big drawback, of course, is that it blows up your database sizes. So accelerated database recovery, what it does is it keeps versions of rows inside the user database so that it can instantly recover. Well, the problem is, what happens if you have really big change rates? What happens if people are doing long transactions? All that data is now ending up inside your user database. So your user database will explode in terms of size. This also has effects across your backup sizes, your CheckDB runtimes, your replica sizes, your amount of disk space available, your restore times, all of that, your index rebuild times, your update statistics times. So I'm not saying accelerated database recovery is bad, but it's a tool that's designed to make rollbacks quicker. Do you do so many rollbacks that you're okay with making your database sizes larger and your replicas larger and your backups take longer and your restores take longer and your CheckDBs take longer? How bad do you want to make your rollbacks go faster? That is a decision that only you can answer, and if you're anything like the rest of the YouTube viewers, you can only answer it poorly. Juicy says 220 instances of sleeping query with open transactions. This is a great example of how all throughout here y'all are going to learn so many interesting things about your SQL servers and about the applications that are installed in there that you never knew before. A whole new world. William says Eric recommends using ADR if you're using RCSI. So that's interesting. I'm not going to go deeper into it here. I would disagree, but I understand why he does that recommendation. I would also say that the kinds of clients who hire Eric are probably more willing to deal with larger database sizes because they are not what we would call poor. Companies who hire Eric and who hire me are typically what you call wealthy. They can afford those kinds of large databases, whereas the kinds of people who are watching this free YouTube video are what we call broke. No broke boys, no new friends. Da, 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 da. I live in Vegas, and I've gotten much more into electronic dance music lately. Okay, so SP Blitz First gives you a snapshot as of right now, and it's really useful if you're going to have someone do troubleshooting against a SQL server. One of the things that I also love about it is when you're on the phone with someone and they're like, the SQL server's down right now, it feels really slow, can you remote desktop in and fix it? And you're in a bar in the Bahamas and you're hammered out of your mind, you can say, hey, go run SP Blitz First and read me off the rows on here to give me a rough idea what's going on. And if there's no problems found, SP Blitz First will actually say, no problems found. Which is so useful because then you can tell the person on the other end of the phone, well, it looks like there's not really a SQL server problem. They're going to go, but can you come in anyway? But at least that way it helps you set the priorities and go, yeah, I'm not going to be running across the beach in the Bahamas in my bare feet trying to get back to production when I already know that SP Blitz First says no problems found. I will get there. That doesn't mean that I'm going to actually run and get it there. Henrik Clausen says over in Slack, chat, Henrik Clausen says, just a 2 terabyte database here makes us poor, I assume. Henrik, I know that your partner tells you a lot that size matters, but it's not really true. Just because you're bigger than most people, Henrik, just because you're large, doesn't mean that you're broke or rich. Size doesn't matter. It's all in how you use it. I just had to make that joke. And I know Henrik, and I like Henrik a lot. Not that I don't like all of you. I like some of you. Let's push the button and see if we can get it back to work. No, I unplugged it and replugged it, and it still doesn't work. So, all right, I'm going to go back over here to our So SP Blitz first, the first thing that it's useful for is when you're running it as of right now. But what if you're running it and you want to see since startup? Oh, before I do that, so I ran it with no parameters. The other way that you can do it, and this is useful for when the help desk runs it, for when developers run it, and I want everyone in the shop to be able to run this. Now, it does require sysadmin level permissions to see this stuff. But if you go to the documentation for this, if we go to SP Blitz first. If I go to the documentation, look at that, Redgate. When you Google for SP Blitz first, Redgate's like, we have monitoring. I see that you're searching for stuff that's free. We have stuff. Hey, can we get some of your money? We're Redgate. Redgate, I am not going to let you live that one down. Carl says, we love you, Brent. So we'll go to SP Blitz first, and we'll go down through and read the documentation. Inside the documentation, it tells you how to grant permissions to non-DBAs. This sounds kind of scary because it involves creating a certificate, but all that create certificate does is it creates a fake login. People can't log in as this certificate. This is only useful for signing stored procedures so that then you can grant permissions to this certificate, and anybody who runs the stored procedure is using the certificate's permissions instead of their own. So basically, it lets you assign SA level permissions to SP Blitz first. This is a really useful technique. I use this all the time when I was a database administrator. For example, I had a stored procedure to kill queries. I didn't want just anybody killing queries, but I did have a stored procedure that would kill queries, and I gave access to the help desk. And I said to the help desk, if I tell you to kill a query, I want you to run this stored procedure. And what the stored procedure would do is it would first log the query they were trying to kill, like log what session it was coming from, what application it was coming from, what the query was. It would log who was trying to do the killing, who the logged in user was. Then it would run some checks against the query. Is it one of my queries? Is it a backup query? Is it a restore query? To make sure it wasn't something that we knew shouldn't be killed. And then if it passed all those situations, then it would actually go through and kill the query. So the cool part was that I could give sysadmin level permissions to this certificate, sign the stored proc with this certificate, and then they'd have super user permissions inside of that stored procedure, but just not generally. I love doing this for all of the first responder kit because I am a really big fan that everyone in the company should be able to go run SP Blitz and SP Blitz first queries. Because I want to be transparent and I want to make sure that they are able to do troubleshooting, and I want them to be able to see that I'm not hiding anything from them if something's broken on the server. More, it says, what would be the best query to look at high numbers of deadlocks? Well, let's go take a look. Let's see here. Out of the queries that are in this list, Moritz, out of the queries that you see there on the screen, which ones do you suppose would be useful for locking? Well, that's mysterious, isn't it? Huh. Guy, just can't tell those names. They're so cryptic. Could it be the one that has lock in the name? No. Can't be that easy, my goodness. Those names, they're just so helpful, aren't they? Moving on. Austin says SP database restore. Trevor says, from where would you have them run the kill query stored procedure? Some kind of UI? I just gave them access to the stored procedure and they ran it via SP or via SSMS. The more advanced you were, you could give them some kind of web page or whatever. But generally, when I work with help desks, I'm not that advanced. They usually already have access to SSMS. I don't need to teach them how to run queries. I just teach them how to open SSMS and then run a query, and their permissions get pick up from there. Okay, so this is really useful for help desk people to run it as is, just plain old SP Blitz first, or developers or managers or whatever. But when smart, attractive people like us, HC, for the love of God, HC, I'm going to make example out of you. When you people give answers in someone else's webcast, you distract them because your answers are wrong. HC, where do you think SP Blitz Lock gets its data from? Come on now. Come on now. Come on now. Come on now. So SP Blitz first. So that default set of no parameters whatsoever, that's fine for people like Moritz. But for the rest of us who actually know what we're doing, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on expert mode equals 1. Expert mode equals 1 does a little bit. Oh, I need to put the server under pressure again here. Although it would be useful because it's not under, well, no, it is still under some pressure. Let's go fire off this thing again. Let's do it just across, say, 2 threads, just so that we got a little bit more headroom. Or from HC, that was a person that I meant to be roasting back there. So at SP Blitz first, expert mode equals 1, it doesn't do more work, but here's what it does. Before it takes the first snapshot, it runs SP Blitz who. So this first set of results here, the very top one, this is a different command called SP Blitz who that tells you which queries are running right now as of this moment. When I'm doing emergency troubleshooting, sometimes I want a little bit more detail, and this is a great example of what it's doing. So it's running SP Blitz who, and I'll even write it out in the way that it's kind of working. When you run SP Blitz first, or SP Blitz first with expert mode on, it's doing this, and then this. So it's doing the SP Blitz first work, but before and after, it's also running SP Blitz who in order to list out which queries are running. SP Blitz who is a lot like SP who is active, aka also the similar to activity monitor. So all of those are really kind of similar. I am fine with you using SP who is active. It's another open source script that's a lot like SP Blitz who. They both do the same kinds of things. They both have slight column differences where one is better than the other in some situations. This product, though, is hot, stinking garbage. This thing is terrible. It will show you problems or queries that are supposedly problematic that are not problematic. It will hide from you queries that are problematic. For example, if you're having a query run 1,000 times a second, it odds are won't even show up inside of here. It'll show you metrics that are meaningless. It'll ignore the metrics that really are meaningful. Friends, don't let friends use Activity Monitor. Good, smart people switch over to SP Blitz first and SP Blitz who, and or as SP who is active, which is fine as well. So the first thing that it ran when we did SP Blitz first with expert mode turned on, the first thing that it ran was the list of running queries. If we go a little bit further down, this has, the next set is the same headline news result set that we had before. This result set is exactly the same as what we had before, but then it returns a lot more detailed information. For example, it will give you all of the available wait stats, storage statistics, and perfmon counters during that 5-second span. That we said SP Blitz first runs for 5 seconds by default. So if you're trying to figure out what the top wait types are, where your service bottlenecks are, or if you're trying to figure out if your storage is keeping up, This storage section is really interesting to me. I don't use this often, but when I need it, it's super useful. During this 5-second sample, here are the number of reads and writes that we did. You can see whether they're reads or writes over at the far left-hand side. There's a pattern. There's some that are reads and some that are writes. Tells you the number of, in this case, reads that we did, how much megabytes we read or wrote to storage, and then how fast that storage is keeping up in terms of milliseconds. This is so cool when I'm trying to figure out which files are really hammering the storage badly, and TempDB can show up in here as well if we're doing a ton of TempDB work. And this is specific to this 5-second time span. If you're doing troubleshooting that you want to do for a longer period of time, because after all, 5 seconds is kind of sus. You may have a lull in your workload, or this may be a huge peak in your workload. You can take longer samples. You can say seconds equals 60, for example. This will run SP-Blitz2 right away so that you can just get started looking to see if there's some problematic query that's killing the server. Then it writes its snapshots, waits for 60 seconds instead of 5, and then takes another snapshot and compares the differences between those two to see what happened. When I'm doing more longer-term troubleshooting with clients, that tends to be what I do. You can also write this stuff to disk. Output database name equals master output schema name, schema name equals DBO. Output table name equals blitz first. Now, that first output table name is just the headline news result sets. You can write all of the result sets. You can write the wait stats. You can write the perfmon stats. You can write the file counter stats. All of those. If we go back over to the documentation, I give you the commands to log it to tables, say every 15 minutes. I give you output database name, schema name, table name. I give you the table name for file stats, perfmon stats, wait stats, blitz cache stats, and blitz who stats. You can run all of those if you like, and then log those over to disk. If you do that, like the documentation says, you only want to log every 15 minutes. Don't log more or less often than that, because there are views and whatnot coded to set up so that it automatically checks for 15-minute deltas since the last time it ran. This is really useful so that you can go back in time and see why was the SQL Server slow last night as of, say, 5:30 p.m. So you can set up a job that just runs this every 15 minutes. Which brings us to a discussion of overhead. So how much overhead does this have? I don't do any performance tuning on SP-Blitz first. I never have, and someday I probably will. But I've never done it because my personal feeling is if you want really low overhead, go buy a third-party monitoring tool. The third-party monitoring tools that are most popular out there in the industry are SolarWinds, aka SQL Sentry, Quest Spotlight, Foglight, Redgate, SQL Monitor, and Idera SQL DM. Those 4 products, they leapfrog each other from time to time. One of them will be leading the others, then somebody else will leapfrog. I don't really care which one you use, but those are all more performance tuned for lower overhead than SP-Blitz first is. They all cost around $1,000 per monitored server. But let's be realistic. What kind of audience are we here? Are we the rich folks here? No, we're the cheap folks here. So I understand if you put SP-Blitz first in an agent job, and it will have overhead. Just be aware, y'all are all like, broke, we're poor, roasted and broke. Todd has a good point, roasted and broke. So I would understand if you put this in and used it for every 15 minutes. Just don't install it to do monitoring if you're not going to take action on it. It doesn't do any alerting to you. All it does is log data to tables. It automatically deletes data older than 7 days, so it only keeps a limited amount of history on there. That's actually a parameter that you can choose too as well. You can choose to keep more or less history in there, and you could also centralize it into a central reporting server if you like. So that's the basic idea behind SP Blitz first. But as a consultant, that's how it uses. So this is how it's useful for performance tuning as of right now or as of 5:30 p.m. But as a consultant, I use it a little bit differently. I say since startup equals 1. So what since startup does is, remember how I said it takes a snapshot of a bunch of stuff, waits for 5 seconds, takes another snapshot. Well, with since startup, what it does is it just doesn't take the first snapshot. It assumes that the first snapshot was all zeros. It just takes a snapshot as of right now, and it says, okay, since this SQL server started up, what's been going on? And this is kind of interesting here. So this, see how it says, I'm going to move this. No, I can't move it any further over that way. See how it says hours sample over on the far left-hand side? Hours sample, 146. So 146 hours that this SQL server has been up. And I'm going to write this down up here on the top so that we can see it. Hours sample equals how long of data history we have, aka uptime. And then the second number that's inside there, thread time, equals how much time has been spent running queries, including parallelism. So this helps you understand how hard the SQL server's been asked to work. In 146 hours, our SQL server has run 575 hours worth of queries. And you might be like, hold on a second, Brent, how is that possible? Well, remember my SQL server has multiple cores in it. When a query goes parallel, let's say that we've got a 4-core server. When a query goes parallel, it'll go parallel across 4 cores, plus there's going to be a coordinating thread, aka the manager thread. So if a query runs for 1 minute and it goes parallel, it's going to have 5 minutes of runtime or more, because in any one parallel plan, you can actually have multiple zones of the query that go parallel, sometimes even at the same time. Plus, your single CPU cores can be running multiple queries. You could have some queries that are stuck around waiting on locks. You have some queries that are stuck around waiting on parallelism. You got some that are waiting on storage and so forth. But the higher this number goes, the harder working the SQL server is. If it's lower than uptime, your SQL server's bored. It's sitting around idle most of the time. It might have bursty workloads, but overall, on average, it's kind of sitting around bored. This server is having problems. For every hour on the clock, it's running a few hours worth of queries. And then during that time, out of those 575 hours over there, how much time did we spend waiting on stuff? When you're doing performance tuning, if you only take one lesson away, it's that focus on your top wait types. I don't care about buffer cache hit ratio. I don't care about disk queue. I don't care about CPU percent busy. What is the SQL server waiting on? Because maybe CPU is really busy, but we're waiting on locks. All the queries are just sitting around waiting on locks, and they keep burning CPU trying to check things on locking. Or maybe we're waiting on storage because the storage is really slow. What is our top wait type? And whatever that top wait type is, let's work on getting that down. Now, these wait types, they were named by Microsoft developers for Microsoft developers. These are super cryptic. In my Mastering Server Tuning class, we go through each one of these and we tell you how to go fix it. But because this is the no broke boys, no new friends audience, I want you to be able to link to the best open source, or the best, it's not open source, but the best freely available material on weight stats out there. Paul Randall and Kimberly Tripp's library on weight stats. For any weight stat, you can copy paste it and go over to their site. Like if you're like, what does exec sync mean? Whoopsie daisy. Copy. And then pop out over here to our web browser, and you can paste it in there, and you can read more details about the tech behind the exec sync weight type. Oh, I love that it's absolutely right. No one should be republishing this or using this info on a commercial website because they work hard on this. Although their font kind of looks like Craigslist. I think they might have a problem with their CSS. So it gives you very technical details. It does not straight out tell you how to fix some of these, but at least it gives you the technical details on what's happening there. So this is really useful to me when I walk up to a SQL server trying to figure out what its top bottlenecks are. If I'm working with a stranger server, goodness, excuse me. If I'm working with a stranger server, if someone's telling me, hey, I need you to fix my server, I'll go output type equals top 10. And then, whoopsie daisy, I forgot to do an ending comment mark there. And this gives me a little nicer, tighter display that's better for screenshots and for copy pasting and sending around to people. So that this way, if you want to get advice out on the interwebs, you can say, here's what the top weight types are on my SQL server. What should I go do next? Focus on whatever your top weight types are, and reducing those is going to make the biggest deal. Now, there is one exception. There are some kinds of weight types that we call poison weight types, as in, that weight is poison. Never trust a big database and a smile. With poison weights, you may not see a whole lot of them, but when they hit, it feels like the SQL server is locked up. Also, SQL Server may not count these weight types times really accurately. Like thread pool is a great example of that, where SQL Server doesn't really track how much time the server looks like it's locked up. So we don't float poison weights up to the top, although the more that I think about it, I should probably do that. However, in SP Blitz, the query that we ran earlier, we do tell you if you have poison weights happening on this server. Okay, so by now, we've run an overall health check with SP Blitz. Just to come back up, we ran a health check with SP Blitz. Check server info equals 1. Then, as a consultant, we ran SP Blitz first, since startup equals 1, in order to give ourselves a performance check of what the SQL Server's top bottleneck is. Then, based on that top bottleneck, we're going to start doing query tuning, index tuning, and that's what we're going to do after a bio break. So I'm going to take a bio break. We will take let me look at my buttons and see how long I have set. We will take a 5-minute bio break, and when we come back, I bet that button's not going to work. Let's find out when we click it. We'll take a 5-minute bio break, and when we come back, we'll start looking at indexes and queries. So see you back in 5 minutes. Let's see here. Nope, it sure did not. Man, hold on a second here. Let's see if I go over to Configure Stream Deck. Let's see what happens if I double-click on this. Nope, it didn't do anything. What happens if Nope, I can't export. You're going to make me do it? You're going to make me click on these things? All right, I'm going to click on these things. I'll be right back. Y'all caught the mute. There we go. That's much better. I was saying that it's very funny. One of you said Brent flying off on to find one of his customers. That was actually flying on one of my customers. One of my customers was Maverick Helicopters out of here. So that was a ton of fun flying from Las Vegas Airport out to the Grand Canyon. Absolutely beautiful. And it was funny because it was one of Eve and I's early dates in Las Vegas. And on that flight, Eve got massively car sick. Or motion sick. And I laughed because I was like, I kept telling Eve was looking out through her phone, like watching through the phone as we were flying over stuff. I'm like, don't do that. You got to look out at the horizon. You got to see, if you look through your phone, you're going to get sick. And by the time we landed, she's like, couldn't enjoy any of it. So lesson to people, when you take helicopter rides, look out through the glass. You can have your phone, like hold your phone up, but don't look through it. Just leave it there and just, sit it there. Okay, so we did our health and performance check. And then next, let's go take a look at indexes. So I'm going to say SP Blitz Index, get all databases equals 1. Now you can run, if you just run SP Blitz Index by default, it runs, I don't need my stress test running while this is going. We'll go ahead and cancel out of that and close our task manager. So what SP Blitz Index does is it gives you an analysis check across all of your indexes. It's checking to see whether or not your indexes are designed correctly. So just because people keep chatting and saying no audio, if you don't have audio, refresh the page to catch up. You're way behind. So what it gives you is a design check across your indexes. Now, when I do index design work, I do what I call my death method. Dedupe, eliminate unused, add desperately needed recommended indexes, tune indexes for specific queries one at a time, and heaps usually need clustered indexes. So you can see why I call it my death method, because the letters kind of work out that way. The index recommendations in SP Blitz Index are prioritized by this death method. The stuff on deduping and eliminating comes first, because my idea here is that I want to get the dead weight out of the way before I start adding more indexes. Usually when people come to me for performance tuning, they're on one of two extremes. Either they have never added any indexes, or somebody's been just throwing every missing index recommendation in there, every single one that comes in. And I'm going to tell you two true stories to illustrate that point. So let's switch over here. So two true stories. One of them comes really recently. It was within the last month. I was working with a client, and we're going through and looking at their performance. Their tables didn't even have clustered indexes. The tables were just heaps, meaning the data was literally stored in random order. That's a topic I don't even cover in How to Think Like the Engine, because generally it's incredibly stupid. Like, why would you store your data in random order? There are edge cases where it actually does make sense in SQL Server, but for the most part, you're going to want to put your databases in your tables in some kind of order. So I'm working with this client. I'm like, hello, have you ever put any indexes on tables? And so we go start putting in, like, here are the indexes that you need to put in, and they're off to the races, and things are just fine. Let me zoom out just a little bit so you can see me a little easier. Then in the other extreme, I got called into New York City. I had to make an on-premises visit to a client in New York City that was having all kinds of performance issues. And I go into their skyscraper office, and I go into this little room where I'm meeting with the database administrator, and we start looking at the stuff, and I run SP Blitz Index, and they're having all kinds of locking problems. And I said, all right, so let's look at your main table here. And SP Blitz Index on the dedupe and eliminate points out that one of the tables had 170 some indexes in it. It was like 174 indexes on one table. Now, when you're a consultant, you have to be really good at the poker face. And so it helps to have like a drink nearby, not like an alcoholic drink, although that certainly helps too. But it helps you to just kind of sit back there for a second and have a drink and just kind of like gather your thoughts. So I said 174 indexes. That's an interesting number. Tell me how we got to that. It's one of those open-ended questions that doesn't throw guilt at anybody. And maybe there's a legitimate reason. I don't think so, but 174, sure. Let's find out. And the DBA says, well, every time they bring me a slow query, I go run it through the database tuning advisor. I see which indexes it needs, and then I go and add them. Okay, that's a little bit sketchy, but hold that thought. That still shouldn't get us to 170 when the table doesn't have that many columns on it. So I'm looking at SP Blitz Index, and it starts warning me about duplicate indexes, exact duplicate indexes with exactly the same names, or with exactly the same columns. And I'm looking at the names, and it's like someone just rolled their hand over the keyboard. It's like IXDTA, whatever, you know. And there's the same indexes over and over again. And all of a sudden it occurred to me. I said, what? When you run the database tuning advisor, where are you running it? And he brightens up and he says, oh, I would never run it in production. I know that's bad. I run it over in my development environment. And I said, yeah. So you run it in your development environment. You bring the recommendations back over to production. It gives you a warning saying the index already exists, and then you go roll your hand over the keyboard. He goes, exactly. He said, that's exactly what's going on. He said, I figure the database tuning advisor just keeps using the same names over and over. Well, I got to make the index names unique, so I just roll my hand over the keyboard. Who cares? I said, when was the last time that you restored their production database over to development? He's like, oh, God, it's been a really long time. And I said, okay, so here's what's happening. You're running it in the development environment where it thinks you don't have an index. It's recommending an index to add in production that you do already have. It does have a unique name, but you already have that index in there. So you're adding the same indexes over and over again on the same columns. SQL Server will gladly let you do that. SQL Server will let you create indexes on exactly the same columns because maybe it thinks it's like a temporary situation where you're going to swap in a new index for an old one, like if the old one became corrupt. So I said to the consultant, said to the DBA, I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, as we're looking at SP Blitz Index's output, I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through and really quickly just rapid fire drop the exact duplicates. Anytime they're exact duplicates with the same exact columns on them, I'm just going to go through real quick and script out the drops because SP Blitz Index will script it out for you. I'll show you where that comes in here in a second. I said, I'm just going to drop them. I said, this is safe. It's not going to hurt anybody. Clearly, no one's using index hints. If you were rolling your hand over the keyboard, they're not hinting those indexes by name. I said, I'm just going to go drop those to get them out of the way. So I walk through them. I'm doing them right in front of him. 30 minutes. We're done with that. On we go. I said, okay, next, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the near duplicates. We're going to look at ones that start with the same column. And as I'm explaining that, someone bursts into the conference room. Someone comes bursting in and they go, did you guys do something to the database? As a consultant, I am perfectly willing to take the fall for whatever happened. It is my fault if we did something wrong. So I said, yep, absolutely we did. Tell me why. What did you notice? The person said, it's unbelievable. We're able to go from screen to screen now. We're able to click around. People are able to get into this app at the same time. All the blocking problems we were having are completely gone. It's magic. What did you do? And the poor DBA is just turning white as a sheet because the DBA is realizing that they are personally responsible for the app's increasing slowness. They kept making things worse by adding these same indexes. So I don't want to get anybody fired. It doesn't, even if I got you, a lot of you on this call are completely incompetent. But you know what? If I get you fired, you know who's going to take your place? Somebody who's just as incompetent as you are. And as long as you're learning and making progress, why bother getting you fired? So DBA thinks that I'm going to say what happened. And I said, well, what we did is we used this rare configuration switch on SQL Server. I said, it's going to make things much faster. I said, we're going to continue to make changes back here. If you hear anything else or see anything else, please, by all means, come in and let us know. They left. Poor DBA's like, whew. Whew, thank God I'm out of here. So off we go. So back over here to SP Blitz Index. So when I run SP Blitz Index, my goal here is to find out is there a lot of low-hanging fruit in one area or the other? Did people either under-index the bejesus out of their tables or over-index the bejesus out of the tables? So then what we're doing is we're going through the death method in the beginning. Here are some indexes that are either exact duplicates or near duplicates. Let's take the first couple of examples, the first couple of rows out of there, and I'm going to highlight them just so that you can see them and then move into here. So it says, warning, there are approximate duplicate keys. There are two indexes up here. One index is on downvotes, and it includes a handful of columns. The other index is on on downvotes and then display name. Let's copy these out just so that we can see them. We're going to copy them and then paste them in here. So it looks like this one's on downvotes and then has a bunch of includes. This one's on downvotes and then display name and has a bunch of includes. Now, if I'm going through rapid fire and I want to merge these, what I probably want to do is create one index on downvotes, display name, last access date. Do I want to include anything? That's up for debate, whether or not I want to include these extra columns. Like we talked about yesterday when we were talking about and how to think like the engine, these included columns take up real space. They are updated every time SQL Server updates rows. So if I'm having blocking problems, I may not want to include those columns. But this index right here that's just on downvotes, what the query that uses that might hit this would look like is where downvotes equals 0, let's just say. And then this one might be where downvotes equals 0 and display name equals Brent Ozar and last access date equals 1900-01-01 or whatever. Well, any query that used this index up top, any query that was only filtering by downvotes, that query could use this index. Say that again. If I have an index that's just on downvotes, and then I have an index on downvotes and then some other stuff, any query that used that was only filtering by the first column in the index, I can drop this index and no one will know. Now, I do still have to worry about the includes. If this was a covering index before, I may have to forklift these includes down and merge them into here. But otherwise, I can totally drop this index and no one will know. That is why SP Blitz Index is warning you that you have these approximate duplicate keys. You got these two indexes that are really similar and you could merge them down. That is what the deduping process of the death method is. When I said dedupe is death, dedupe, eliminate, add, tune, and heaps usually need clustered indexes. But also if you look over here under usage, these indexes aren't getting read. Reads is the number of times that an index has been used to make a query go faster. Writes is the number of times that an index has had to make a query go slower because we've had to update that index for inserts, updates, and deletes. In an ideal world, I don't keep indexes with 0 reads. If I'm going to go through and do the death method, in a perfect world, I'm going to do the eliminating first in order to reduce my work. But I can't call it that because EDATH doesn't make any sense. So I call it the death method because I end up doing those two first things in the same pass anyway. I end up doing deduping and eliminating in the first pass anyway. But just know that I'm going to be dropping indexes with 0 reads as I move through here. So edith, I like that. HC says the edith method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop most likely indexes that have 0 reads. There is a little bit of a catch. 0 reads since when? 0 reads since when? And it shows over there on the left-hand side, uptime 6 days. That's why we show this over at the top. Uptime 6 days. These metrics are only since this SQL server has been up, or in the event of an availability group, since this database failed over here. If you have indexes that are only used as part of a month-end process, like end-of-month reporting, you may want to keep those around. Sometimes people will say, well, actually, we have year-end reports, and we should really keep a index usage all year long so that we can before. No, I am not keeping indexes around for reports that only run once a year. Suck it up, Buttercup. I'm not going to pay the penalties of inserts, updates, and deletes all year long. If you want indexes that are going to make your year-end reports faster, if you desperately need that, it should be done on a reporting server anyway. You should be scheduled reports, like batch reports, that run behind the scenes. You shouldn't be interactively running a report once a year. But B, if you really are doing that, if you're interactively running reports from time to time, then what we're going to do is we're going to create the index as we get closer to those ends of years. ADP says using multiple indexes for small and static tables covering multiple scenarios shouldn't be a problem, right? So small and static tables already gets me suspicious. If you have small and static tables that are rarely updated, I wonder why you would query them so frequently. Now, if it was like configuration tables or dimension tables in a data warehouse, I'd kind of get it. So the other thing that he says like countries and organizations. So I'm going to introduce you to a concept that you should be checking out. That concept is cache. And I don't mean like money. Cache as in C-A-C-H-E. Your applications should not be regularly querying the database to get the list of countries. I'm going to tell you a true story. I had a client who called me in for performance tuning emergency. CPU was really bad on their SQL servers, and I go in there and I look at the top 10 most resource-intensive queries. And number one, by a long shot, looked basically like this. Select latitude and longitude from cities where city name equals Chicago, where city name equals Denver, where city name equals Amsterdam. This query was running thousands of times per second. Per second, thousands of times we were fetching the latitude and longitude for cities. And I looked at the developers in the room and I was like, do these cities move frequently? Are we like monitoring to see where Chicago is at right now? Why would we run that thousands of times per second? And everybody kind of, and they said, well, come out here and we'll show you. So I stand up, we get out of the room, and we go into this giant room with hundreds of people. All of them have terminals. And they have this application. It's a shipping application, and they can see little packages on the screen in real time, see where their packages are at. And I said, well, how often does this redraw? And they said every 60 seconds. Every 60 seconds, all these machines, they're all on independent clocks, so they're all scattered all over. Every 60 seconds, they're refreshing their little maps. And they said, plus, by all means, we also have lots of remote workers, and they're all running this. I said, well, every 60 seconds, why don't you cache the latitude and longitude on the front end for, say, Chicago or Des Moines? Whatever packages you just got 60 seconds ago, cache the list of latitudes and longitudes for that, and only come back to the database when you need a new city. That should be good forever. As long as that application is up, you should never need to call for Chicago again. Chicago is not moving. I could even understand if you updated it once a year. They said, it's going to take a little bit of work in order to do that. I said, fine. In the meantime, why are you refreshing it every 60 seconds? Unless that package is on the Concorde flying across the United States at the speed of sound, it is not moving that quickly. They're like, yeah, you're right. So they changed the automatic refresh time out to like 5 minutes or 15 minutes, and immediately the problems went away. So I get concerned when someone says we need a whole lot of indexes on a small table that never changes like countries. And I'm like, no, you do not need indexes. You need a caching layer on the front end, because from the time you get that data out, you should never ask for it again. My general rule of thumb when I'm working developers is if that table has less than 1,000 rows, you should get the contents of that table at startup. Get the entire contents of it, pull it down into memory, and if it's truly not changing, in memory is where it should stay. You should never ask for that data again. Gerald says cache rules everything around me. Exactly. The fastest query is the one you never make. This is also why when we talk about stuff like the first responder kit, cream, Jeremy says, cache rules everything around me. Cream. I've never heard that. That's pretty awesome. But so that's why we don't do indexing on tables like that very frequently. Does it hurt you necessarily? No, but it's just a sign of an application level problem that we probably should be fixing it. All right, let's come back over to here. So we start going through and working through the death method, deduping and eliminating. Next up, after the deduping and eliminating, is the adding portion, as in we're going to add high-value missing indexes. Now I'm going to drag a column around over here just so that we can see some of this decision-making stuff a little bit better. And then I'm going to zoom in. So we got these warnings here around high-value missing indexes, and it looks like we've got a bunch of them on the post table. There is this high-value number. It says estimated benefit per day. What this is roughly the number of times that the index would have been used, how much of a difference SQL Server says it would have made in the query plan, in this case 100% faster, I suppose it would complete instantly, and then the average query cost of the queries that needed this index in QueryBucks. QueryBucks, that metric that we talked about yesterday during How to Think Like the Engine. If you multiply these three things together, the number of times it was used, how big of a difference it would have made, times the average query cost, that's going to roughly equate to what that estimated benefit per day is. Each day, here's how big of a deal it would have made. I'm going to focus on estimated benefits of 1 million per hire. If it's not getting at least 1 million benefits points per day, I'm not really interested in it. Like Linda Evangelista said, I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. I don't get out of missing index requests for less than 1 million benefit points per day. But you do have to keep in mind that all these are made-up numbers. All these are made-up numbers by the query optimizer that is just guessing how big of a difference it would make. The query benefit or the query cost can be wrong. The benefit can be wrong. Hell, you can create some of these indexes and SQL Server may not even choose to use them. But if I'm just going in and shotgunning really quickly, trying to make as many index improvements as I can very quickly, then this is pretty useful. The other thing I want to know when I'm looking at this is how many indexes already exist on the table and how large that object is. So in this example, this is like that client I was telling you about within a month ago that most of our tables didn't even have indexes on them. This is a really good sign that we should probably consider adding some indexes. Then SPBlitz index will tell you what columns they're on, and it'll give you the create T-SQL to go through and create the index. And then this is my favorite feature of SQL Server 2019. This is amazing. I didn't even think to ask for this. Sometimes Microsoft just pops out with this stuff, and they're like, you know what would be amazing? Let's give them something they're not even asking for. This is the query plan, if it's still in cache, of the query that was asking for that missing index recommendation. Can we get a round of applause for Microsoft for putting that in? That's fantastic. That one feature alone to me is worth SQL Server 2019 as an upgrade. Database doesn't even have to be in 2019 compatibility level for you to get that. And then presto changeo, you can click on there and see here is exactly the query that was recommending that missing index request. Now, let's also have a round of boos, not booze, but booze with an S, for the fact that it doesn't look like there's a missing index recommendation in here. And you have to actually scroll down in order to see it. Are you kidding me? I love Aaron Stellato, the chief person behind the SQL Server Management tooling system right now. But every now and then they have a disaster of usability like this that sometimes I think that Microsoft is just trying to make me have more job security by hiding things from you that really matter. And so that's a great example of that. So that is the A part of the death method, where I'm going to look at adding desperately needed recommended indexes. And then when it comes time to tuning queries for specific queries or tuning indexes for one query at a time, that I'm going to use a different tool for. I'm going to use SP Blitz Cache, which is going to show me my most resource intensive queries. Then finally, heaps usually need clustered indexes. That's down near the bottom of SP Blitz Index's default output. So down here I have heaps with forwarded fetches and heaps with a non-clustered primary key, where then I can go look at adding a clustered index on those particular tables. So this is SP Blitz Index's default output. By default, when you run it, it only runs in the one database that you're in. Like if I run it in, say, Stack Overflow 2010 and just run it with no parameters, it's going to do the design analysis on that particular database. Here, for example, that the database is small, the tables aren't getting used. We filter out stuff when there don't appear to be problems. And a development environment is a great example of that. In a development environment, you're not getting writes. You're not getting heavy inserts, updates, and deletes. You're not getting queries that trigger missing index requests. So this isn't really a useful approach in development environments. You really want to run this in a production environment. And just like all of the SP Blitz Index or SP Blitz stored procedures, all of them support output database name equals, in this case I could say Stack Overflow, output schema name equals DBO, output table name equals Blitz Index. So what's cool about that is that the DBA could set this up on a daily job, and then that way, and I would say I say daily, but I'd also do it weekly, a weekly job, because then that way the developers can go in and query and see all kinds of stuff about the missing index DMVs that they may not have permissions to view, or that they may not have the time to go through and view. If I'm going to run it weekly, I'm going to run it weekly on Friday afternoons. Because Friday afternoons, we've got a whole week's worth of index usage built up. And when people tend to do reboots for maintenance or patching, they tend to do it on the weekends. So that way, if I go look at last Friday's index usage data, it's likely that the server's been up the whole week, and I'm going to have a lot of good diagnostics out of there. So that's the default set of parameters. Really useful. That's what I run most of the time, is just plain old get all databases equals 1. The next way that you run it is mode equals 2. And mode equals 2 adds another parameter called sort order. So mode equals 2 is like an Excel-friendly, copy-paste friendly inventory of all of the indexes in the database. So here, if I want to find, and I do this all the time with clients, what are your largest objects? Show me what the biggest tables in the system are. If I scroll across towards the right, it says it's got columns for the database, schema, object, the index, the kind of object that it is, what columns it's on, what its key columns are, come across here all kinds of useful stuff, including reads and writes. And then way over here we have index size. And it gives it to us in rows and reserved megabytes. And it also gives it to us in a nice, more plain text, copy paste friendly kind of way. So this way I can go through and see what are the largest objects in your database. And you would not believe every client, every single client, we get surprises on this all the time. And I'm going to tell you an example of one. I had a client whose database sizes were growing out of control. They didn't understand why. Databases were bigger than they'd ever been, and they were having all kinds of performance problems due to that. And so because they said that their biggest problem was the size of the database was growing out of control, I said, all right, let me just go run SPBlitz index, mode equals 2, sort order equals size, and show me the biggest ones on the top. And the top table, by a long shot, like it wasn't even close, was a table called ClickLog, CLICKLOG. I kind of turned my head on ClickLog. Why on earth would you? What is that? And we go and start looking at the table definition, and it's like date, time, user ID, XY in terms of pixels. And as I'm looking at it, going like, what data are we storing? And everybody else in the room, what is this? And two of the developers were like turning white as a sheet, and they're like, oh no. And clearly you could tell whose problem it was. And I'm like, what? Talk to me. It's okay. It's already happened. Just to be honest, talk to me. And they're like, that wasn't supposed to go into production. I said, we were trying an experiment once to see where people clicked on the website. That isn't supposed to be in production, and it isn't supposed to be logged into a database. And they're clearly looking so ashamed. And I'm like, no, don't be ashamed. This is cool. This is the kind of production problem we love. Because do you know how to turn it off? And they were like, yeah, we're turning it off right now. I said, great. So can we truncate this table? And they're like, yeah. We don't ever need to take a backup of it. So all we did was truncate the table, wait for them to turn it off, drop the table, and their size problems were done. I'm like, okay, my work here is done. You need anything else? They're like, yeah, you have to keep working. I'm like, so coming back over to here, so that gives you a rough idea. One way to sort is by size, which gives you by reserved megabytes. Other ways that you can do it is by things like rows, reads, writes, and locks. So you can sort by how big the table is a couple of different ways. You can sort by how often it's being used. You can also sort by writes, which is useful because you can find things that have a whole ton of writes, but there's no reads. Now, Iron Juice brings up a really important point. If the server's in an availability group, usage stats have to be combined across several replicas. Exactly. That's why you may want to collect it into one table. And Iron Juice follows up and says that's exactly what they do. Yes, you can log it to table and then group them together by index, by object ID and by index ID and sum up the reads. That's very good. Absolutely. Also, it's the same thing true not just for availability groups, but it's also true for log shipping and for replication as well. It's also true for software vendors who do the software as a service design pattern where they put each client into its own database. It's going to be up to you to combine that data across from multiple databases to figure out which indexes no clients are using altogether. But you got that toolkit here with SPBlitz index with mode equals 2 where you can write that down. Works really well. There's so much useful in here in terms of like lock escalation attempts, how long we've spent locking, and much more. Which things are compressed, which things are not compressed. And then we also give you the drop and create statements so that if you're going to make changes to an object, you can script out the drops really quickly and you can script out the recreates really quickly. So that's mode equals 2. There are other modes. Honestly, those are the two that I use by far the most often. This one gets you that inventory, the copy-paste friendly inventory. And I'm just going to make a note of that inventory. And then put the comma down here. Then the other one that I use all the time is just plain old SP Blitz Index with no parameters. Now, when I was going through this, I said I like to get a high-level overview of what work I need to do. What do I need to do from the death method? But I don't usually do my work out here. What I usually do is I pick the table that I'm going to work on. Like in this case, let's say I'm at the add indexes stage of doing the death method. Clearly, I've got a lot of indexes that I need to add over on the post table. That's where I come over into the more info column. The more info column lets me run SP Blitz Index at the table level, so I can dive down into just one table to see what's going on. Let's copy that out. I always like to paste it and put it into a new window, because sometimes in a production environment, running SP Blitz Index with get all databases equals 1 can take minutes. Because, especially with stuff with partitions and lots of partitions, can take minutes in order to execute. So I don't want to lose this juicy, valuable data here. So I'm going to pop over into another window and then go run this over here. When I have, I don't know what I was going to tell you about column store, but I'm going to tell you that in a second. So SP Blitz Index, when you run it at the table level, it gives you several sets of results. The first set of results is the list of indexes that already exist on the table. In this case, I've only got my clustered index on the table, and that's it. The next set is the indexes that SQL Server wishes it would have had. And the next set is the columns in the table, because sometimes you want to know what the structure of the table looks like. This is just easier than going out and expanding Object Explorer. Now you've got everything you need in order to do index tuning right here. I've got the create index statements that I need if I'm going to go create new indexes. If I'm going to drop existing indexes, I've got a drop in here for that as well. So I can go back and forth and just use this as one central control panel for that table to do my analysis. Additionally, there are a couple of things that I don't use that often, but you may need to. If there are foreign keys on that table, they'll be listed right here. And then there's also the complete contents of the table's statistics histogram. We dump out all of the histograms for you. So for example, this table has a statistic on ID. You can see the contents of DBCC show statistics on that stat, just like we talked about yesterday and how to think like the engine. If I needed to look at statistics columns here, I could do that. I'll be honest with you, I almost never use that. Somebody else, I believe, in the community contributed that because they used it all the time. There's something else that it'll do. If you have an object that's a column store table, it will also give you a visualization of your column store table. And I'm going to talk about this in much more detail in my Fundamentals of Column Store class, which you can attend for free. Coming up for free, October 13th through 16th, I'm teaching the first half of each of my fundamentals classes. Fundamentals of Index Tuning, Fundamentals of Query Tuning, Fundamentals of TempDB, and Fundamentals of Column Store. In the Fundamentals of Column Store class, you will be able to learn exactly how that visualization works. You're going to learn how to think like the engine, but for column store tables, which are completely and dramatically different. There's a common saying out there that column store is like an index on every column. That is not how it works at all. It's got a grain of truth to it, and I can see why people originally said it that way, but that is not how it works at all. And in this class, you'll find out, the free version, you'll find out exactly how that works. This is the first half of all of those 4 fundamentals classes. These will not be streamed on YouTube. In order to watch those classes, you do have to register. There is no cost. You just have to go to brentozar.com/go/funweek to get registered for that. If you can't attend live, you can also buy the recordings, but hold off on that until Black Friday. During all November, I run my annual Black Friday sale where I do big discounts on my fundamentals classes, my mastering classes, and a lifetime bundle where you get access to all of my classes on SQL Server, Azure SQL DB for the rest of your natural life. It's always funny to me because companies will be like, yes, we would like to buy the lifetime class, but we would like to have it for our database administrator. What happens if they leave the job? I'm like, well, it's their lifetime. It is not a job's lifetime. This training goes with them, not with your job. That means if you can get your company to pay for it, it's yours for the rest of your life. You think about quitting your job? Why don't you ask for that training? You can screw them over. You can take this training with you. Don't they owe you that as hard as you've worked for them? Why not? Who are you going to piss off? You're thinking about leaving anyway. You don't like those bozos. Go sign up for that class. And then that way, now you will have to wait until November because the sale starts November the 1st. But in November the 1st, hold out in your job. I'm not saying you should hold off on that bad job until November. Maybe you should. I'm not quite sure. Sonny says, don't say that part out loud. I know, right? Well, your manager's not watching this far in. It's like 2 hours into the webcast. We both know that your crappy manager has about 15 seconds worth of attention span. They'd already be off clicking somewhere else, watching TikTok, whatever it is that they go do. I say that because I'm a really bad manager. I pay more attention to like TikTok videos than I do to. I feel really bad about that. Taz says, I love my job. That's cool. If you love your job, tell your manager, hey, I'm in here for life. Don't you want me to get smarter than I am right now? You don't want me being this dumb forever, do you? Surely you want me to get better at some point. The only way that I'm going to get better is if I go to some training classes. I'm sure as hell not going to learn anything new around here. Nobody around here knows more than I do. So there we are. Plus, I bet a lot of you are really in your dream jobs because, after all, you're watching YouTube while you're at work. I forgot to switch over this calendar. It's September now. I have a calendar with great photos from Iceland, and I love having that up on the wall. I know where that exact little shack is, too. I've driven right past that exact little shack. All right, so back over here. SQL Dev DBA says I'm a crap manager here, and I can confirm that my attention span is less than a short period of time. So come back over here to SP Blitz Index. So that's where that column store section comes in. I'm going to teach you how to use that column store section during the fundamentals of column store class. Those are the most important parameters there for SP Blitz Index. There are others. Those are just the most important ones. Let me go through and look and see if I missed anything else. No. Oh, one other thing that I didn't mention. I said you could output the contents of SP Blitz Index to a table, and I said you should do it every Friday afternoon. The other reason why you want to do it every Friday afternoon is that because up in the cloud, no one can hear you scream. I always think about stuff like that. Up in the cloud, no one can hear you scream. There's a space movie, I forget which one it was, but like in space, no one can hear you scream. Might have been Alien. Can't remember which one it was. I love the new Alien Earth TV show. But the writing is the worst writing of any TV show. It is Alien, Ben said. The worst writing of any TV show I have ever seen. It is the classic, stupid, there's a blood trail over there. Let's go follow that blood trail so that we can see what killed that man. No. Get out of there. It doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. But it's a lot of that really dumb kind of writing. Anyway, HC says I love Prometheus. Prometheus is one of the few movies that I have downloaded on my iPad and I can watch on planes over and over. I've probably seen Prometheus a dozen times. I absolutely love that movie. Same thing with Gravity with George Clooney and Sarah begins with a B. What the hell is Sarah's name? Gravity, Tom Hanks. Gravity, Tom Hanks, Sarah. It's not Sarah. Sandra Bullock. That's what it is. Sandra Bullock. You guys got that? All right, perfect. Yeah. Oh, that's an it's a gorgeous film. Plus, I have it not just on my iPad, but I also have it on my Apple Vision Pro, so that if you want to see a scary movie on an Apple Vision Pro, Interstellar will scare the bejesus. It's not Interstellar. Gravity. Gravity will scare the daylights out of you. TAS is Interstellar. I also have Interstellar downloaded, so that pretty well tells you. I can't, just brief segue, I'm way off topic now. I can't watch anything historical that's fake. Lord of the Rings, eject. No interest whatsoever. Like anything that's supposedly historic that takes place in another place or time or timeline or whatever. I'm like, trolls? What are you, goblins? What, the one true ring? Whatever. I have no tolerance for that whatsoever. I just immediately and instantly eject. But you put anything in space, like the Mars movie with Jason Bourne. What the hell's the guy's name? Oh my God. I can just sit there with popcorn and watch things like that continuously. That and cartoons with really bad senses of humor. I know, right? Like, I lose all my geek credibility when I say I can't do anything like Lord of the Rings. Matt Damon, that's who we were thinking of. Anything like Lord of the Rings. The Martian. Yep, that's right, Joseph. That's what the name of the movie was. I cannot, for the love of God, just immediately, anything like Lord of the Rings, I'm just gone. I have no interest in it whatsoever. The other movie that I know I'm going to, like lots of y'all will be brokenhearted. The other movie that is unbelievable is Moon with Sam Rockwell. This movie is incredible. And nobody knows about it. It didn't get a whole lot of press when it came out in 2009. And it is stunning. And I'm not going to say anything about the plot of it or whatever. Just if you're into space movies, if you're not into space movies, don't bother. But if you're into space movies, it is stunning. It's don't read anything about it. Don't read the summary. Just pop straight into that. Gerald says, I tried Lord of the Ring 4 times, never made it past 5 minutes. I can't even watch like trailers of it. I'm immediately out. I'm like, nope, no thanks. I never read books like that either. It just wasn't my thing. Harry Potter, another one. Y'all are going to be so pissed off about that one. Harry Potter could not. Come on, man. Witches and things flying around on brooms. I have no faith in that whatsoever. I'm like immediately cash out, bail out. I have nothing to do with it. William Gerard says, Dune. Nope. Can't do it. I've like it's visually beautiful. I love looking at screenshots from it, but like as soon as anything related to plots, I'm like completely out. Star Wars was as far as I ever pushed it, and I could watch the first 3 Star Wars because I was kind of forced to as a kid. You know, when you're that young. So the first 3, the first one I wasn't alive like in movie watching age when that came out, but the overall watched the first 3. After that, I just was like. Jar Jar Binks. I'm like, I'm out of here. Mark says that's okay. You can be smart about databases and wrong about movies at the same time. And I agree. I hear those movies are amazing. I just can't. HC says you don't also like Avatar. Correct. I could not stand it. I thought that was the dumbest visual design, but that's just me. Jeremy says dystopian novels like Hunger Games. Yes, Hunger Games was beautiful. Like, it was visually beautifully shot, creative. I really enjoyed that. That was pretty cool. Should one of these days I should have to, and I should say my music taste is really terrible. You should be warned that I have a blog post coming out. I'm not sure what day it's on, but it's in like the next 2 weeks, where almost every paragraph has a reference to an NSYNC song. Henrik says, what about Inception? I actually haven't seen it yet, and it's not because it's not good. I just have to make time for it. Inception, and there was something related to it. Memento was another one, but some of those time travel ones, I'm incredibly interested in it. I just haven't made time for it yet, but I have read the Wikipedia summaries of it forwards and backwards because I knew it was like hella complicated, and I wanted to have some kind of reference of what was going on. And that, what was the other one? It's not Inception. It's the one about that Christian Bale did. Not Christian Bale. Oh my God, Nolan. Christopher Nolan. Nolan time travel movie. Tenet, yes. I haven't watched that. It's like this, Tenet, Memento. There's several of those that involve Interstellar. Tech Grant says Interstellar. That's true. That's also a time travel movie. I adored that. Was it stupid? Completely. The thing with the watch was incredibly dumb. Yeah, no. And Crispy Bacon says, "What about Deliverance?" I actually never saw Deliverance, but it was I don't want to say before my time. What year did Deliverance come out? Yeah, 1972. I wasn't even born yet. I understand it's a classic movie, and I don't have anything against it. I just never saw it. Adjustment Bureau, I've heard of, but I've never seen. Yeah, all these. Oppenheimer, I've also not seen yet. Oh, I have so many things that I have to go see. So many good things. Speaking of, there's no good transition for that. So SP Blitz Index gave us that health check. Now we'll do the last script that we're going to cover today, which is SP Blitz Cache. So SP Blitz Cache is about finding what are the most resource-intensive queries that you want to focus on. And the one parameter to know there is sort order. There are lots of different sort orders. They're covered. Gerald says, before COVID, we had a whiteboard of movies that one of our coworkers had to watch. I did that with Eve. So I was like, okay, Eve, you have to see this movie. You know, there are a few movies that people wouldn't ordinarily see, but you have to see. And Eve had seen, being from China, Eve had seen most American movies, but there were some oddball ones like Moon that I was like, you have to see this. This is spectacular. Airplane is a good example of that. The Airplane comedy movie. If you're born in the last 20 years, you would not have seen Airplane, but you have to see Airplane. Everyone has to see Airplane. Pick the wrong day of the week, stop sniffing glue. Okay. So SP Blitz Cache, the one parameter that really matters is sort order. There are lots of other parameters it outputs to database, all kinds of stuff like that. But sort order is really, I can't be serious. Sort order is really important because you're always going to have some queries that take the longest, some queries that read the most data, some queries that get the highest memory grants, some queries that get the highest memory grants but leave the most on the table. There's all kinds of sort orders that you can use, and I'm not going to go through all of them. That's what the documentation is for. But I'm going to show you how to use it in general. I'm just going to, and I put up there the sort orders of CPU because it's the default, but there are lots of other options out there. With SP Blitz Cache, it returns two sets of results. The top set is the top 10 queries plus some analysis on them telling you what their problems are, ordered by whatever sort order you chose. Like in this case, it's total CPU. So you can see it right away, right here, the one total query that I need to work on. That top line right there. It's head and shoulders above everybody else. If I'm looking for which query is using the most CPU, the answer is clear. There is one up there at the top of the list that is burning way more CPU than everybody else. And when I'm working with clients, I'm like, let's just look at how quickly the decimal places drop down. This is the one we need to focus on if we're trying to reproduce the CPU or trying to reduce CPU issues. Normally, you focus on this top result set. The top result set has a set of warnings. Some of these are cryptic. I understand if you don't know what, for example, low cost, high CPU means or non-sargeables means. The bottom result set is a decoder ring for those warnings. So anytime you see a warning that you don't recognize, you can go in here and say, okay, let me see more information about it. This gives me details of what that particular warning means. And then there's a you read loser section that actually tells you how to fix that particular problem. I should also say we work really hard to make sure that every one of the URLs is free. that anytime throughout these free scripts, whether it's my site or someone else's site, we always want to send you to something that is the best resource that's free on that particular topic. Some of these pages may hop out and lead you, say, if you want to learn more, go watch this module in a paid training class. But if there's anything that I can do to get you across the finish line for free, I'm absolutely going to do it. William catches one thing that's really important. I said normally I look at the top 10 up here. But anytime that I see a priority 1 warning down in the bottom section, what that means is that the rest of this data can't be trusted. Let's look at what the one is here on mine. Plan cache instability. You have 455 plans in your cache. 100% were created today, 100% in the last 4 hours, and 28% in the last 1 hour. That means if I'm trying to understand what are the most resource-intensive queries on this server, I can't believe that list because SQL Server has amnesia. SQL Server is not able to remember all the query plans that are coming through. And let me show you why. When you see this, it's always one of two things. Well, one of three things. Either the server just restarted, which shouldn't really be the problem. The server could be under incredible memory pressure. SQL Server uses memory to cache data, for query workspace, for query plans, and these things will come under pressure from time to time if the queries want a ton of memory. For example, SQL Server may flush plans out of the cache in order to make room for other stuff. Those two, they're not really that common. Here's the thing that's really common. If I say DBCC free proc cache, which gives SQL Server total amnesia, doesn't remember any execution plans. And I say select star from DBO users where display name, oops, make it exactly right, equals Brent Ozar. And then I copy paste the exact same thing. And then I run SP Blitz cache. I have the two queries that I don't really care about. That's fine. I'm more interested in SQL Server. What do you remember about the queries that have run recently? And SQL Server says, well, I got this one query that's executed 2 times. Okay, so far so good. Let's change one of these to Lady Gaga. And let's do this same thing again. Turns out Lady Gaga actually has accounts at Stack Overflow. Who knew? I'm going to run SP Blitz cache again. And now, there's a website that's really useful for this. It's sadtrombone.com. You go to sadtrombone.com, you click play. I use that all the time. So sadtrombone.com here, every time SQL Server sees a different string, it gets a brand new execution plan. This is exactly like putting option recompile on the query, except that query is actually cached. We're probably never going to see it again. We're constantly querying this for all kinds of different queries. If your app is doing this, your SQL Server is very quickly going to have amnesia. It's not going to be able to remember all the queries that are flushing through the plan cache really quickly. Plus, you're not going to be able to believe the top 10 queries in your list. The top 10 queries in your list are just the ones that happen to be parameterized. Anything that's unparameterized won't get grouped together to the top of this list. So if you see any priority 1 warnings, don't believe the stuff that's up at the top. It's simply not accurate. I'll tell you what else. You can't believe your monitoring tools. You can't believe Query Store. You can't believe anything that groups together queries and tells you their impact. Query Store won't show this correctly. Monitoring tools don't show it correctly. So let me tell you how it pops up with clients. What ends up happening with clients? Over and over again with clients, people will come to me and they'll be like, I keep working on the top 10 most resource-intensive queries. My CPU's on fire, and I don't understand why. We're spending all this time tuning, but we've looked at what Spotlight or SentryOne tells us, and these queries, we're trying to work on it, but there's just nothing left. It doesn't matter. Why is our CPU so high? And the reason that they can't tell what's really happening is you got all these queries like knifing them in the back that disappear every time because they look slightly different. Because to SQL Server, they are different anytime there's a difference in the query. And it also has some kind of fun side effects. So let's go back to the same query. Let's go back to having both of them be Brent Ozar, just so that you can see there's nothing up my sleeves. I'm running the same query twice, and it's going to show 2 executions for exactly the same query. Well, let's dun dun dun. There's no such thing as case sensitivity for system commands here on things like that. Where works great, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, it makes no difference. Doesn't make any difference whatsoever. You know what else you do is whenever you get a query, you do this thing, oh man, who would ever put the query on one line? You need to have some enters in here, and you need to put tabs in here, so that way it's much more readable. Well, when you do that, you are getting a totally separate execution plan. So if you go in and look at those are considered to SQL Server 2 different query plans. Okay, let me give you another one. Copy and paste. I'm going to put a comment out here. Hi, Mom. And go run them. Any difference between the strings, even if the strings don't show up in the plan cache, is going to produce a different plan. There was a time when one of my clients said they were going to put in here like the app server name. Server was Web01, and the user that ran the query was B. Thompson, and the time that the query was run was 9:49 and 01 a.m. If you do any kind of dynamic comments like this, you are going to get a brand new execution plan for every single query that runs. But my favorite example out of this by far, I'm going to blow the plan cache. I'm going to hold down, I'm going to describe what I'm doing because you can't see it. I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to hit the End key. See my cursor's at the end of the line. I'm going to hit Execute. I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to hold down Shift and hit the Down key. You see where my cursor's at? Hit Execute. One of those has an Enter and one of them does not, and they end up with 2 different plans in the cache. Any difference between those queries will get you one of those priority 1 warnings, assuming it's widespread through your application, and you simply cannot believe the stuff that's at the top. If you have any priority 1 warnings, stop, read that URL associated with the primary URL. Brian says, are you kidding me? I know, right? Isn't that bananas? And you know the other funny thing about that is that when I'm looking at that, the one that had the enter and one that did not, there's a column called query hash, and they have the same query hash. SQL Server knows that they're effectively the same query, and yet SQL Server builds a brand new execution plan for both of them. Oh, God, it's absolutely terrible. So if you have any priority 1 warnings, go through and fix those now, as opposed to trying to work on the top most resource intensive queries, because the queries that are up here on the top just may not be the biggest, most resource intensive queries out of those lists. So you've learned all kinds of things through the course of today's webcast. I bet you've learned a couple of things that surprised you. Perhaps that last one caches people all the time. When you go through and look at your most resource intensive queries, you're going to look at those warnings. You may be surprised by some of the things that we find in here, things that SQL Server is not alerting you about, and then you can go through and click the query plan. We also give you more information about missing indexes above and beyond what SQL Server will tell you, and much more. This is really just the start of your learning journey with that. Let's come over to here. This is really just how to use the tools. This is just how to use the first 4 most important tools out of the first responder kit. And your journey's only beginning. Now you're going to learn all kinds of things about how to do index tuning with those tools, how to do query tuning with those tools, how to find out whether column store makes sense for your workload using those tools, how to figure out which queries and which systems are blowing up TempDB using those tools. There are so many things that you're going to learn during my free Fundamentals Week classes. Again, totally free. This is going to be the end of the road for today, so the URL I want you to go off to now is to go register for those totally free classes October 13th through 16th, where we're going to do for Monday through Thursday. We're going to run fundamentals of index tuning, fundamentals of query tuning, TempDB, and column store to show you the first 4 hours of each of those classes, and then help you really get started on mastering SQL Server. I'll tell you a secret too. During those webcasts, I'm also going to be running a link to free mastering classes. It is only going to be for people who actually attend these. I'm going to be giving the link out inside those, where you're going to get the first 4 hours of each mastering class for free live as well. So let's get your learn on during October and November. Go register for those classes. Hope that y'all had fun. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you like. Hit subscribe and you'll get notifications whenever we go live. Also, if you liked this, I am running this exact same How to Think Like the Engine and How I Use the First Responder Kit next week. Tell your coworkers to go subscribe to the YouTube channel or get notifications when those 2 videos go. So this exact same thing, or of course you can watch the on-demand videos of these as well. Thanks. Hopefully y'all had fun, and I am going to go off and have myself some breakfast. It is 8:41 a.m. here in Vegas. It's time for me to go hit my local restaurant. I will talk to y'all later. Adios. Oop, now I got to hit the stop scene. Where's the ending scene? There it is.